Hey guys, welcome to this pedalboard walkthrough. You might be on my YouTube channel about to check out my walkthrough.
And you might be on mine.
So this walkthrough is gonna be the first session of our brand new tone course that we have spent hours and hours filming, breaking down our pedal boards, showing you how to dial in things from zero, talking about amps, how to pair amps together in stereo well.
And we cover guitars extensively as well. Like we grabbed, I think 20 guitars and integrated it into our pedal boards and even just broke them down individually. So there's a lot that we dive into.
Yeah, we teach you everything that we've learned over the past, 10 plus years of touring, playing live, recording, all in this tone course to hopefully accelerate your journey when it comes to finding your own tone. So before we dive into this pedalboard walkthrough, check out this video to see what you can learn in our new tone course. Your tone is almost like your fingerprint. It's very much an art form just as much as you're playing. Doesn't matter if you're a seasoned pro with a $20,000 guitar rig or if you are just starting out and you have a $300 guitar rig. The point of this course is not to just show you settings that you can copy and paste, but it's to teach you how to listen with your ears and not see tone with your eyes, because what you hear is everything. I've been asked for years to film a tone or guitar course and I never felt like the timing was right. For whatever reason, I always wanted to wait, whether it was my own journey and just still exploring, or I just wanted to feel very, very complete and thorough. When Kenyon and I have talked about it, we feel like we can offer something that is an incredibly complete package where we both feel that we can really accelerate your journey and shave off years of you trying to search and refine your tone and grow.
So across all of the different topics,
we cover the three main aspects when it comes to tone, and that is
guitars, amps,
and your pedal board or effects. In this course, we have over 30 hours of material.
When it comes to pedal boards, we do full walkthroughs as well as dial our entire boards from absolute zero.
And we comment on it to let you get inside of our heads. What are we thinking when we're looking for good tone? What do we think good tone is based on our years of touring experience, playing live, playing in the studio?
We're gonna talk about signal path, stacking drives, modulation, delay, reverbs. We also grabbed a handful of iconic overdrives and just threw them on a stool and started dialing to figure out if we can make all of them sound good with our rigs. We're actually going to implement 20 different guitars
to show you different types of hardware, different types of pickups, the way they interact with our board and our amps, and how we might favor some over another, or how we might tweak our tone to work with a certain guitar over another.
And also just help you know what to look for when you're trying to buy a guitar.
In this course, we are using all real amplifiers, but if you have an amp sim or a digital amp modeler, all of these principles will apply to you and aid you in how to getting good tone out of those. In our amps course, we're gonna talk about what makes an amp good. What do we look for in our guitar amps? What do we want from them? How do you dial in a good tone and a balanced EQ?
We both separately dialed 6 different amps.
Low wattage amps versus higher wattage amps.
How do you make those dance and work well together? Then we throw them together and then we actually figure out if there's something wrong. How do we change that? What do we need to do to balance one side to the other? And of course, no amp course would be complete without just knowing how to mic it up.
And the different tones you can get just from moving your mic around and also swapping your microphone. We're gonna give you a breakdown on the differences in tone between a dynamic mic, a ribbon mic, and a condenser mic. We're gonna teach you how to isolate your amps properly, whether you're playing live to make your sound man happy, to isolate stage volume, or how you might isolate them at your house or in the studio.
Ultimately, when it comes to dialing in your tone for your style, there can really be a lot of individual little pieces. So by breaking all of these down, you'll understand more of what's going on. So when you hear something that's wrong, or when you hear something that's right, you'll know where to place your finger to figure it out and understand it.
We were super thorough with this tone course, and we think it's going to accelerate you on your journey for excellent tone. So if you want to check it out, head to tonefactor.co now. Hey guys, we are gonna do a walkthrough of my pedal board that I have been using in this setup and configuration for the past year and a half or so. This video is gonna be a general walkthrough of the setup and the effects. Session 2 is gonna be more of a deep dive where we zero out knobs, and I'm gonna show you how I would dial this thing in from scratch so you can kind of get into my head and see what I'm looking for when I dial in tones and learn from that. You can check out Kenyon's pedalboard walkthrough on his YouTube channel and check out this full course on tonefactor.co. So this is a look at my pedal board. A lot of these changes I made before we did the come up here recording in the Redwoods. And another change with that I'm doing is running different amps. I have a 1959 Fender Tweed Deluxe and a 1959 Fender Vibrolux that I'm running in stereo. And they are lower wattage amps than, the the AC30 and the Benson, the 30 watt amps I'm used to playing. So some of these changes were dialed in with those amps in mind, and it was a really fun change, really happy with the tone. So I'm demoing this board currently through those amps so you can, take a listen to the tones I used on that album and tones that I'm currently using. So this guitar right here is a Paleo Guitars Strat. David Paleo built it, and it's been the guitar I've been playing probably the most on the road. I love it, love the way it sounds. Check Paleo Guitars out. We're gonna do a whole another session talking about guitars, pickups, setup, tone, how to dial in your setup for different guitars. But now we're gonna jump into the board. All right, guys, so let's get into it. So if you look at this board, it's pretty similar to my build that I had in 2020 that's on my YouTube channel. And that's because it's the same board, same wiring, and I have ran this pedal board for probably, I think this is my 5th year. It was built in 2019. Obviously, I've changed out a few key pieces, some beneath, which I will show you. But just wanted to say what a testament to the build quality of this, wired by David Paleo. If you need a pedal board, you need to reach out to him. His boards are so clean. He's always like, don't show anyone the underside of this, because his boards are way cleaner than what this is even now. But just terms of quality, I've had 0 issues with this thing on the road. All the cables flown at hundreds of thousands of miles, and it's just rock solid. So I've made some changes over the past few years with different albums and tones that I've wanted to pull out of my rig. So we're gonna go over all that now. You're gonna get to hear all the changes and what I'm running today. And we're gonna start by taking a look underneath of the pedal board where the brains of it are. So this is the underside of my pedal board, and if you've seen my last pedal board rundown, you'll see I'm still rocking the Strymon Power, which has been tried and true, absolutely robust. Powers everything. You have voltage switches over here if you need it. Plenty of milliamps to feed all of the hungry pedals, so check those out if you haven't. This is my main power inlet, and that feeds the Strymons as well as jumps over here to an auxiliary outlet. I also on this side have a audition loop that's 1/4 inch where I can patch some things in, which I'll talk about a little later. I have a 1/4 inch input, and then I have 1/4 inch outputs if I'm running straight to an amp, and then XLR outs which feed the amps. So the biggest change to this side of the board is one thing I've added are the Pinstripe pedals. And Charlie at Pinstripe is making amazing stuff, and this has been a huge improvement for my tone. So this is the input of the buffer, and I do have a guitar input here that I would run a little jumper 1/4 inch into this, but you'll notice a tonal difference if you add something in between your guitar and the first pedal. So there was a little bit of capacitance that was changing the tone. So recently I'm not even using that input, I'm just plugging straight into the buffer. But this is an amazing sounding buffer with 2 different output options. So definitely check that out. The next thing is the TXRX, which has replaced the SGIs and my old TA links for me. And this system sounds phenomenal. Again, it's Charlie's circuitry, Jensen transformers in it. It's XLR out as well as 1/4 inch that are patched into the side of my board. So if I want to run to amps, I can 1/4 inch out, or I can run through the XLR cables up to 300 feet or so. So these are the receive boxes that he has, and cool features that are on these is you got a ground lift on each of them, as well as polarity. So if you're playing 2 amps that are out of phase, you can go ahead and flip that and make sure you get them in phase when you're dialing them in. We'll talk more about amps in another session, but that is super handy to have on the receive boxes when you're right at the amps dialing them in. Because if you've ever tried to dial in amps that are, out of phase from each other, it's really weird standing in front of them. So having that ability to switch right there and double check is really invaluable. So let's flip the board topside and go through some sounds and talk about some tones. The first thing I go into is this DigiTech Drop. And this is something I recently added as I've been out on the road with Brandon Lake. And this has been an awesome cheat code to have. So normally I prefer picking up a different guitar if you need a different tuning. But quick transitions on the road, you often don't have that luxury, especially if you don't have a guitar tech to run and switch a guitar really quick. So this pedal has become a great tool to be able to drop the tuning of this guitar. So I'll give you a little demo of what that sounds like. It's the first thing my guitar goes into. It's not in my looper, and with it off, and then when I turn it on, you can adjust in semitones or half steps how far you want to drop the tuning of your guitar. So it's a really, really cool tool to have. You'll notice it does slightly change the tone and gives it that kind of, a little bit of that synthetic, like, you know, octave poggy thing, but the trade-off for the convenience of being able to have that and quick transitions, like I said, you don't have time to transition a guitar and you want to retain your parts and the way the vibe is with those. This has been a great pedal to have. One song we've been using it, or I've been using it on as kids, and I drop it down a whole step and it has kind of a baritone vibe. Baritone, it's a new word, sounds like a pasta. So I could totally switch to a baritone and play that. I wouldn't be able to play the same vibe on a standard tune electric without it. So anyways, really cool cheat code and not ashamed to use it. It's a fun tool. So after that, I move into my compressor, which is the tone press. Real quick before we continue this video, I just wanted to say it's my goal this year to get this channel up to 100,000 subscribers. Currently, at the time of this video, we are at 33,000 subscribers. And I looked at my analytics and 70% of you guys roughly who watch this channel and my videos are not subscribed. So that means if all of you guys did, I would be at 100,000 subscribers overnight. So please consider subscribing, hit the bell, and thank you so much for the support. I'm excited to offer new YouTube content in the future as my channel grows. All right, let's get back into the video. And I'm an always on compressor kind of guy. And the way I've had this set up, I kind of dial it in a little different or tweak it slightly depending on what amps I'm running through because the headroom of the amp and the tone of it. Again, we'll deep dive into that in a later session. But in general, always recommend a compressor that has a blend function. So it blends your dry guitar signal with the compressed signal. So it's a parallel function. And I love the way the tone press sounds. They have a big box version that also sounds amazing. Small box has a attack time toggle as well as a bright switch. And currently I have both of these in the classic mode. So it's the regular attack, not the fast, and then I don't have that bright boost on. I'll bypass it and clean tone without the compressor. Sounds like this. And then with it. So you can hear without it, there's just so much dynamic in the tone from digging in to picking softly. And when you're playing a single coil guitar like a Strat, you especially want a comp to kind of rein in those dynamics. It makes your softly picked single notes a lot more full and usable. And I kind of tweak the volume on it and how hard I want to hit the amp. Almost per day or sound check. I don't move it a lot, but depending on how the amps are acting, like if I'm noticing my clean tone is giving me too much breakup, I might back off the volume a little bit. But in general, I try to set it up to where, my bypassed volume it's hitting about the same because that's how I dial the amps in is when I plug straight into the amp. So we'll talk about the tone press a little bit more in a later session and what I'm looking for when I'm dialing in a compressor. So after my tone press, my signal goes into this looper, which is a discontinued build your own clone Super 8. You could only buy these as kits and build them. So I've built like 3 of them. And I found this, probably 7 years ago or something. The reason I liked it is it's very simple. There's no MIDI, all mono loops, but it is programmable. So you can program, any of these loops to different presets. So that way when you're stacking drives, and want to run different configurations, you can just hit one button of a preset you made and it'll switch those loops on and off. For example, like this is just the daily, and then if I switch to 6, it's stacking the daily and the SoloDallas Schaefer replica together, and so on and so forth. So I can hit one switch and it pulls up presets. So it's just convenient, eliminates a little bit of tap dancing, but it's still very simple. So my first pedal in this loop is the Electro-Harmonix Pitchfork, which is basically a whammy, and this little AMT expression is tied to that. This has been on my board for a while. I currently have it set up to do, whammy things. And one of those things is doing dive bombs. So it's a lot of fun. It's a whammy in a more pedalboard friendly format. So after the Pitchfork, I run into my next octave pedal, and that is the Electro-Harmonix POG 2, which has been, I've had this pedal on my board for, I think I bought it in 2008. So it's definitely the longest running pedal that I've had and used. And I still think it's like, it does what it does the best on the market, and that's octaves. It has a bunch of filter settings and different octaves and 8 presets. I'm sure you guys are familiar with it. I did a deep dive on my last pedalboard rundown, but I'll just let you hear some of the tones. I'm mainly using it for like octave up or slight octave down to reinforce lead lines, but then, have a few more ethereal settings in there as well for like more swells and all that sorts of stuff. So I'll give you a little demo. Yeah, I mostly use it just for the octave up, octave down, but there's some random organ stuff. I think my son has played on that a few times, so he's probably overwritten some of my old presets, but there's a lot you can get out of it. So POG 2, check it out. All right, out of loop 2, which is the POG 2, I have loop 3, which used to be my light speed, Greer amps light speed, but that's what is left of loop 3 right here. The first drive that I have is the Schnobeltone Daily Driver. And what I love about this pedal is its ability to tone shape. It is very natural sounding, and it complements amps very well, like when you're trying to adjust, how much dirt you want to add or take away, how much low end or top end you want to add, and there's a toggle switch as well for brightness. So it's just a really handy tool to kind of tailor your tone that extra step to whatever guitar you're playing and whatever amp you're playing. And when I normally am touring my big AC30 and Benson. Those are actually out in Nashville right now in a locker, so that's what I'm showing you on the tweeds. And also I dialed this board kind of for the tweeds for that recording, but I might change the settings on my daily driver depending on what amps I'm running through, depending on what I'm hearing and what I want to get out of it. So I'm going to show you some of its capabilities right now. So this is just the clean tone without it. And then here's the daily. So you can hear currently in its current state, what it's doing is just kind of like refining the tone a little bit. You hear the mid-range shift around, you hear some extra brightness, you hear the low end shape different as well. And I'm just going to turn the knobs and kind of show you what it's capable of. So that is some EQ functionality, and as you heard, there's like a wide range of EQ you can add and subtract, but it's all very musical and it works really well. And then gain wise, I'm running it pretty clean right now, but if I wanted to add dirt, it sounds very natural to how the amp sounds, so I'll crank that up a little bit. So again, we'll jump into more scenarios of how you can use this pedal later, but yeah, it's a very flexible tone shaper pedal, and I really have enjoyed having it as, you know, an optional first stage to, you know, use with different guitars to bring out different tonal qualities that I like, and it stacks really well with my next drive pedals that I'm going to show you. So one more quick tone example of how I've used this tone shaping is, you know, during a lot of the come up here recording, I would run this toggle down, boost the top end a little bit, and that would kind of, you know, take some of the higher edge brightness off of the tone and fill out the mids really nicely. So that sounds like this. But there were instances where, you know, I was using position 2 on the Strat, and I really wanted to bring out the glassy, you know, a little more scoop mid, almost blackface Fender tones from the tweeds. And that's where going to the center toggle switch and lowering this brightness kind of gave me what I was looking for there. So you can hear, you know, with the high end rolled back down to an appropriate spot with that center position, it just sounds a little more airy and glassy. So Surrounded by Holy, that song, where I'm using position 2 on the Strat, is a good example of those stratty tones. So anyways, Daily Driver is an awesome tool to have on your board to tone shape and, you know, get your tones dialed. Another way I really love using it is to stack it with my next drive pedals. And moving on to my next one, I have the SoloDallas Schaefer Replica. And while I'm talking about this, I'll also talk about their SoloDallas Tower that I have right here, which are essentially similar circuits, but there's some differences in tone. So these things are super cool if you've never seen them. The circuit in them is based off of a preamp of an old wireless system that bands in the 70s used to use, and it used to color their tone a little bit in cool ways. You know, you could crank the preamp to get some cool saturation, and it also had a limiter feature on them. So both of these have those options. So they're really cool. You can use them as a boost, as a drive, as a compressor limiter. They're really cool tone shapers. And the way that I have found that I've enjoyed using them is almost like drive pedals. And I thought they sounded amazing through these tweeds, because I think their general you know, the general characteristics of them is they don't cut a ton of low end, and they introduce a really cool breakup that is very textured. It almost reminds me of like a, you know, if you've ever played through a cool console or preamp, that when you push it, it sounds really musical. So there's this really cool saturation you get that I really, really liked through the tweed amps, and particularly when stacking them with the Daily Driver as well. So after the Daily, the Schaefer Replica is, you know, my second stage, and I stack it with the Daily, and it sounds like this. And without the Daily Driver on, I'll let you hear what it's doing. So you can hear it's quite a bit different without the Daily. The Daily's pushing it, and it's bringing out, you know, some cool the clarity that the Daily's adding. So my second stage drive is really the sum of those two pedals. It's not just the Schaefer by itself the way I'm running it. But again, you have a lot of flexibility in this pedal, and, you know, different ways that you can run it. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So that is my second stage. And then for my third stage, I am running the Tower, which sounds a little bit different. It can get more aggressive than this one, and I stack it with the Daily as well. So I'll go from my stage 2, which is the Schaefer Replica, to the Tower, and you can hear that contrast. So you can hear it's like, it sounds really big. It's not cutting low end. It's adding this cool gritty thing. That's, you know, a little bit different type of breakup than I've run before, but I've really been loving it. Again, through these tweeds, it sounds a little bit different than through some other amps, but I'm really enjoying that setup, and I loved using it on the album. And it also works great for lead lines as well. So let me just throw on, some verb and delay and show you what it sounds like up high. So it's really cool. I mean, it works like all across the neck, and it just sounds really big. And yeah, it's making those little tweed amps sound like monsters, and I love it. And then of course, as you see here, I still have a JHS Kilt V2 on my board, which this is one of my all-time favorite drive pedals. Still have my V1. Love this pedal. Don't see it leaving my board anytime soon. I use it more with my AC30 and my Benson than I do with the tweeds. That drive section with the Tower, the Schaefer, and the Daily have kind of been my main stages. But I'll just give you an example of what the Kilt sounds like through the tweeds. And then out of the Kilt, I have the red remote, which you can use it to toggle the gain stages on the Kilt. So it's handy just to get another level of gain out of that pedal. So yeah, the Kilt is still one of my all-time favorite pedals. You need to have one in your arsenal if you don't yet. So after my looper, I go out into my Hilton volume pedal, and this is set between all of my wet effects and all of my gain effects. So that way, when I have my gain stage on max, I can turn the volume down on it and you don't hear that amp buzz. And then tuner out, I'm running into my Sonic Research turbo tuner, and it's the mini version. Absolutely love this tuner. It's so accurate, so fast. I don't want any other tuner on my board. Okay, so out of my looper, I run into kind of my first modulation pedal, and that is the Golden Era. And this is a pedal I absolutely love. It's essentially like a tape and vinyl sonic destruction emulator, and it sounds amazing. It's really cool. It's honestly, a lot of pedals do this sort of thing and do it in cool ways, but I think as far as sounding authentic to like real life vinyl warp and warble or tape noise or whatever, I feel like this pedal does it the most authentically. So it's a really fun pedal, and there's a lot of sounds you can get out of it, and it's one I'm like reaching down and kind of tweaking a lot because there's no presets. But I'll just give you an example of the way it sounds as is. So as you hear in its current state, it's very subtle, but you do hear a little bit of that like warble and shaky thing. But again, it's a pedal I'm tweaking a lot, so let me just dive in and give you some examples of what it can do. So it's a very cool, like I was saying, it just feels like, oh, I could make my guitar sound like it was recorded in the 60s to like a cheap tape machine or something. So the next pedal in my chain is a really cool pedal from Walrus Audio, and it's called the Polychrome. And this is like a flanger with vibrato and just a really cool flavor of modulation that is, it has been really refreshing to me. And yeah, there's a lot of different tones you can get out of this, which we'll deep dive on it again in a later session. But there's no presets. I just kind of have it set in this one way, and I'll just maybe the rates or the depth a little bit, but for the most part, this is the vibe of the tone. So you can hear it's like, you know, it's very much a flanger. It has like that shifty EQ thing that makes it sound a little throaty. And just like, yeah, it's like, it's not chorus, it's not vibrato. It has some vibrato in it, but it's just been really refreshing for different tones. This is the pedal that was used on the turnaround lick on Precious Blood. So you hear it's just kind of doing a really cool thing and adding a lot of vibe to it. So moving on from the Polychrome, we go into the GFI Synesthesia. And this is a pedal that I added right before Come Up Here. Bobby Strand and Chris Greeley, who were producing the record, were using this a lot and finding a lot of inspiration for the tones on that record. And yeah, so picked one up, and it's a very cool pedal. There's so many options and things you can pull out of it, because essentially you have, you know, there are two sides to it where you can run any form of modulation that they have in there, like chorus, vibrato, trim, the list goes on. So you can run them, you can stack them, you can run them in series, run them in parallel, a lot of options. But my two main tones that I use like 90% of the time are a Dimension Seek chorus, which is really cool. It's a little more subtle than like my chorus I have in the Mobius, but just kind of like widens things a little bit differently and has a different tone to it. And I have a record setting that is almost like a vibrato, but adds its own, you know, little EQ differences there. But the record setting I run is very subtle most of the time. And a lot of times I'm running that record setting on for the majority of a set. Like there's sets I've played where I just left it on because I liked what it was doing. And adding a cool vibe to the signal. So the chorus side sounds like this. With it bypassed. So you can hear it's not like an overwhelming, like 80s tri-chorus effect, but it's very subtle and creates this really cool width that once you start stacking other effects on it, just like gives this cool dimension to your tone. Hence, it's called Dimension C. This is the record setting. So you can hear again with that, it's like very, very, very subtle, but it's just doing something to my tone that I really like. So again, a lot of times I'll leave that on for a whole set. Sometimes you can stack them, so I do that often. So you can kind of hear like what it's doing to the tone, and it's just kind of making it really big without it being like an overwhelming effect. Once I start stacking things on top of it, like, you know, verb, delay, another drive. Those two settings I'm running like 80% of the time. So let's hear it stacked with some drives. I'll keep it off and then I'll turn it on. You can hear what it does to the tone. So this is, you know, my SoloDallas Tower and the daily. So that is the GFI Synesthesia. So this is my first stereo pedal in the chain. Out of this, we are going stereo out into the Strifecta, as we call it. And first up is the Mobius. All of my presets, all of Kenyon's presets for these pedals, and some other ones are available on tonefactory.co. So go check those out if you have any of these and you want to download these tones. So the Mobius has been a staple on my board for years, as well as the Timeline and Bigsky, and they're just phenomenal sounding pedals. There's other great delay and reverbs on the market, but in terms of like MIDI, programmability, all of the modes that they have, like they just sound so good. And it's been hard to get away from them. So I'll just give you a quick demo of a lot of sounds I like to use out of the Mobius. One of my most used sounds is this chorus. It's more of, more of a wet, dramatic chorus that I use for the 80s thing. So it sounds like this. So I've used that on tons of songs. One song I'm using it on right now is Praise You Anywhere When We're on the Road. Sounds like this. So again, it just does like the 80s thing super well. It's really clean. Very nice sounding chorus. It has trim. And then I have a lot of destroyer settings, which are kind of lo-fi, vibrato. It kind of does its own thing. And I have those options, in the Synesthesia and the Golden Era. But again, it's just a different flavor and vibe. This switch right here is a custom bank switch that I use to bank up and down. On the Mobius, this banks up on the Timeline and Bigsky, which I'll talk about in a second. So here's an example of some destroyer effects that I use. I use these on Always Good, the Bethel music song, and it's more of a lo-fi kind of vibrato setting. So you can hear there's some like filtering capabilities and, another just cool flavor of vibrato, but it has so much in the pedal. We'll dive into that more in a later session, but it's a great pedal. Out of the Mobius, we're running stereo into the Timeline, which is delays. Let's talk about this switcher right here. So this is, an old disaster area MIDI switcher that I've used for years, and it's just set up really simply to link these two together. I can bank them up together or bank down, and then these switches select preset A and B together. So the way I save song presets is essentially per bank on the Timeline and the Bigsky. So I can just bank around and then dial in song-specific reverbs and delays for every song. So the Timeline has a lot of different delay modes that are awesome, and I've used most of them on different songs over the years. My staples are probably the tape delay, and more recently I've been switching to the D-bucket delay for its analog-like modulation that I love. But it also has some like dual delays, pattern delays, filter delays, like really cool stuff. So I'll give you just a quick example. So it's a great delay. We're gonna dive more into the specifics on how to dial in delays, what I'm looking for when I'm dialing a delay in a later session. But out of the Timeline, we're running into the Strymon Bigsky, which is their reverb. Again, same as the Timeline and the Mobius, like a ton of great reverb algorithms and modes that all sound awesome. And I've used most of them over the years on different, songs, but I'll just give you a quick demo of some of the verbs and the tones. then once you pair them together, you know, you have your BPM locked, and you can set cool parameters like, you know, your pre-delay and your decay to get things rhythmic. So they're just phenomenal sounding pedals. Again, we're gonna deep dive into them more, and I'm gonna show you how I go about dialing in tones in our next session. So out of the Bigsky, I'm running stereo under my board into the Pinstripe pedals TX-RX, which is the send and the last thing I go into before I hit my amps. So really quick, I'm just going to turn on some of these pedals and cycle through some different combinations of tones that I've recently been using so you can hear what the board is sounding like together. So one other key aspect of my rig I want to talk about when playing live is the Brightswitch by Rockstock. And this is crucial on dark stages so you can see what's going on here. So check them out. They have a little pedal. You can charge your phone with it, and it lights up your whole board. Another shout out I wanted to give is to Creation Music Company. They have made my road case for this pedal board that I've toured with for the past 5 years, and it's just held up tremendously flying and in trailers. Super high quality, amazing company to work with. I'm just getting my second one made for this board after 5 years of touring. So very dependable. If you need a road case for your board, hit up Creation. So that is a quicker overview of my board as it is currently. Check out our later sessions on tonefactor.co. The next session, we're going to essentially zero this board out, and I'm going to show you how I would dial it from scratch so you can essentially get into my brain and see what I'm looking for when I dial in these tones and these pedals. And I think that will be very helpful and educational for you. Check out Kenyon Reed's pedalboard rundown on his YouTube channel. He's going to do the same thing. And again, you can download all of our presets on tonefactor.co and check out the full course where we're going to, again, talk about how to dial in these tones, talk about how to dial in amps, different types of amps, and guitars as well, and much more. Go check it out, tonefactor.co.